Hello and welcome to this introduction to translating for Dash. My name is Leon White. Many of you would know me by the name Strophe from the Dash Nation Discord or also the Dash official forums. In this video I'm going to briefly introduce the projects that are available for translation at Dash and also some of the specific points that you need to consider while you are translating these projects. So all Dash translations are managed on a website called Transifex. Transifex is an online translation platform that does many of the same things as specialist translation software. Basically, this allows us to keep a record of all translations that were made in the past, and that helps us keep consistent translations going into the future as we change translators and also change the software and other language products. So to work with Transifex you will need a free account. You can sign up for one of these at transifex.com/signup, as you can see here. And once you're signed up, you need to choose which project you want to work on. So you'll enter a username, email, and password to register. And then you'll see if you just go to transifex.com/dash, which I've got open here, then you will start to see all of these projects that we have here. You may need to choose languages and get permission to join the project first, but simply send me a message and I'll make sure that gets done quickly. A quick note, when you are actually choosing your languages, if you could just choose the parent language and not a regional variant. So if you're translating into German, just choose German. Don't choose German for Austria or German for Germany. We're aware that there are regional variants, but for now we're just targeting larger umbrella languages. So you can see here we've got 6 or 7 projects available for translation, and you can choose them from the side here. Not all projects are targeted for all languages. We tend to try and get the most languages possible in the wallets because this is the first thing that the user will experience. So Dash Core is obviously the Dash Core wallet, which you can see here. Send, receive, transactions, all of this makes a lot more sense if it's in your native language. So when you are translating that, it appears under resources, and all of the text in the program actually exists in this one file here called -en.ts. If you just open that, then you can begin translating, and I will show some specific things to watch out for later, but let's get through the projects here first. There's also the Dash white paper in here. I don't think that will be a target for too many more languages. We already have it in about 8. So the next one is the Dash documentation. This is primarily written and maintained by me as well, so if you find a mistake in it, please let me know. The website for that is docs.dash.org, and you can see the sort of text that you'll be translating here. It's basic introductions for first-time users of cryptocurrency, information about how to buy Dash, what makes Dash unique, how to use the wallets, how to get set up as a merchant, and some technical information about the network. This is also our largest project, so there's about 70,000 words to translate here. Not all of that will be translated into every language again. We tend to keep that only for the most used languages like Spanish or Russian. The Dash graphics are a series of things like handouts for conferences, flyers, brochures, infographics. You can get an idea of some of them here. Here we have a Bulgarian version of the Dash difference, which is like basically a big infographic that's useful for Twitter or something like that. The same thing goes for the Dash brochure. This is actually a little booklet that you can print out and hand out to people at conferences. We have a German version of this here. Okay, moving on through the projects here, we have the 2 Dash mobile wallets. So the one here for iOS, for Apple devices, like an iPhone or iPad, and then the same thing for the Android wallet here. I'll again go into specific details of how to translate these products later on in this video. And finally, the Dash website, which is obviously dash.org. All of this information, all of this text here, text like overview videos, how to shop with Dash, what is unique about Dash, instant, private, secure, and so on. All of that is available as strings for translation here, and unlike the other projects that are spread over more files, this one is also like Dash Core, just in one file. So we just have the English version of the website here as en.yml, and you can open that and translate it into your native language. And finally here we have the dash videos. These are a bit of a mixed batch of videos. I think the most important thing to translate here, if we look at the resources again, the dash school videos by Amanda B. Johnson. That would be episode 1 to 6 through here. And you see if we go to YouTube, we can actually view subtitles for these videos in any language. It looks like we've got Finnish there, and then I can switch that quite easily to Arabic or Dutch, and we can, this really helps users who are learning about cryptocurrency for the first time to get a very friendly and easy walkthrough in their native language. Okay, so let's now move along to how the actual translation workflow takes place and the steps that you'll take to complete a translation. I'm going to use Dash Core as an example here, and I'm going to go to the resources section to see the files that are available for translation. I'm going to go to the file that needs translating. All of this will be pointed out to you when we discuss the work that needs doing, but you can also just dive in here if you're a volunteer and start translating whatever you feel like. So clicking on the resource that you want to translate shows all of the available languages. I'm going to look for German in here because I speak a little bit of German. And we can see that this one is 100% translated, but I'll use it for a demonstration anyway. So you just click the translate button and Transifex will load the translation interface. Now, the translation interface has a few sections here. At the top it shows which language we are translating into. Notice that I've selected just German and not a regional variant. Then we have a few tools and buttons here. Concordance is extremely useful. Because it helps us search for how previous translators have translated a particular term. So for example, if I didn't know how to translate the word clipboard, right, where you copy things in the memory with copy and paste, you can search and you can see all previous translations of the word clipboard. They're all Zwischenablage here. So you know that if you are translating and maybe you come across a dash specific word like masternode, and you don't know how to translate this, you can see how it was done in the past, and you should stay consistent with the work that was done in the past to give the user the best possible experience. So that's how concordance search works. This is probably the most important function in Transifex, so you should be using it all the time. Below this header bar area, we have 3 sections here. This might look a little bit different depending on the size of your screen. Here we have each segment that requires translating. So each one of these is usually a sentence, a word, a button, a paragraph, depending on the actual software or product that we're translating. But it breaks it up, so each one has a unique number, and if we have problems with one of them, you can say, hey, please look at segment number 7 or something. You can search through here for specific text. Like I just said, we could find also all text containing specific words, similar to concordance, but it will show you the actual segments then and not the way it was previously translated. Then here is where the translation actually takes place. So here we have the word new. That's neu in German, right? So when you first click there, I'm just going to delete that. It will appear blank. Now here we have a function that will copy the source string down here. So that basically takes this text and puts it in here. That can be very useful once we start getting more complicated segments because it helps you work in order, right? You can just go through the paragraph or the sentence and all of the tags or special computer code sections remain in place. Over here we can see some suggestions in history. Nothing particularly interesting for that one. Maybe I can find something more interesting by choosing this segment. Not quite. Okay, so what you get here are matches, and you can see the quality of the match. If it is 100%, that means it has found exactly this sentence or paragraph translated already, and you can just copy that in there with the copy to source button, which should be visible. It's saying used. This will appear more if you working on something that hasn't already been completely translated. So you'll get something like an 80% match. You can copy it in here, same as you would copy in the English version, and then you can just replace individual words. It will actually highlight the words that have changed. And also, as some segments change over time, you can see the history of the translation for that segment, so it will show over multiple years how this sentence has changed in the past. you might have noticed here there's some keyboard shortcuts. So like Control G appears here. You can see a list of all those shortcuts just by clicking on the cog icon here and going to keyboard shortcuts, and it gives you a list there. You'll work a lot faster if you start using these keyboard shortcuts, but feel free to click around with the mouse first. Okay, so for our first translation, we're going to copy in the original string, translate that into German just by replacing the W with a U, and click Save Changes, or Alt-Enter is also the same. And that saves that in the translation memory now, and it can be used in the software as soon as this is exported, when it is complete. Now, because this is software, often it has to replace certain things in the user interface, like it says, are you sure you want to send 1 dash? That number 1 isn't translated, that's put in there by the software. So let's find an example of that. If we look around, let me see here, number 460 for example. So we have here invalid payment address, %1. Now, what actually happens in the software, you don't see %1. You see the actual address, right, that you typed in. So the software will replace these things that are indicated by a % with some numbers or some information from the software that needs to be communicated to the user. So you need to consider this in your translation in terms of grammar, like where would your language put the invalid payment address? Is it before or after this? There's a more complicated example up here somewhere. Here, for example, we have total %1, private send compatible %2, enabled %3. So these are 3 different numbers that the software will insert there, and you need to be careful that the right number appears in the right place. So always, I would say, copy the source string and then just replace individual words. If you're writing a language which is right to left, you also need to consider the order that the numbers should appear. Otherwise the user will see the wrong information in the wrong place. There are a few other placeholders like this. Let's have a look at the segment up here. Here, for example, we see this little AND sign in many places. Now, what this actually is a keyboard shortcut. If I just jump over to dash here, you can see in the menu here there's little underlines under each of the letters in the menu at the top. F, S, T, H. That's telling me that I can actually, instead of clicking the file menu, I can just press Alt F and it will open. And if I want to then back up my wallet, I don't need to click on it, I can just press B and it will open the backup folder there. So how does dash know which letter you need to press for that? And that is defined here in your translation. So in this case it will make the U as the keyboard shortcut. So that's actually in this window here. You notice they aren't underlined until I press the Alt button, and then it becomes underlined. So this copy URI in the English version is made underlined by this AND sign. So in your language you need to consider, firstly, what does the keyboard look like in your language? Is it English letters? If it's something like a German keyboard, you can just do the AND U like before. But if you're writing a language that uses an English keyboard but does not display English letters in the interface, like I'm thinking Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Arabic, possibly Russian, depending on the keyboard, you need to set the keyboard shortcut according to the software practices that are standard for your language. So a good place to check these is in Notepad, for example. If you open this on a Chinese version of Windows, you will see that the shortcuts here aren't actually under the Chinese character, they're put in brackets afterwards. So you need to choose font, and then afterwards like write font and then in bracket and F, like that. So that means that the user then knows that even though this is written in a different non-English language, they can press the F button still to use the keyboard shortcut. And finally, I have some tags to demonstrate here, which also exist in the Dash Core wallet. Here, for example, these are used to format the text. So you can see here, this is actually a break character, and this needs to appear in the right place as well. So this is a line break, or it could be also some sort of formatting that makes this sentence bold or italic. These need to be in the right place to emphasize the right thing. You will see these tags all over the place. And again, there's a keyboard shortcut to put these in here. You can, if this wasn't here, you can press Alt 1 and it will add the tag for you, or you could just copy the whole source string down there and the tags will already be in the right place. If they're in the middle of a sentence, or if it's like the %1, sometimes you need to consider, do I need a space around here or not? And you can basically just copy whatever has been done in the source language and do the same thing in your language. This can be quite a confusing concept when you first start out, but when you see the results of your work, it will all make sense. If you have any questions about this, please don't hesitate to contact me. Okay, and now just to finish up this video, I have a few more special cases to point out. There are some languages, programming languages, which allow you to specify plurals in different languages. So this becomes important when we're looking at something like the Android wallet here, where it might be telling you if you're entering your PIN code wrong, right? And you have how many attempts remaining. Now, this only makes sense if you consider the number that is put in here by the % placeholder, right? So if we think about it in English, you have 1 attempt remaining or 2 attempts remaining, right? The interface needs to show a different form of plural for the word attempts depending how many are remaining. Now that can get quite complicated in languages like Russian, which have multiple plural forms. So we have a different translation here for 1, few, many, or other attempts remaining, depending on the grammatical formulation of how we make the plural of the word attempts. Now you can see the translator here has got around this by using the same translation for each one and just putting a colon in place. But if we were going to put that in a sentence like hours or minutes, basically you will need to click these buttons, and for most languages it will just be 1 or many, where you write a different translation depending on whether we have 1 minute or many minutes left. So if you see it not allowing you to save a translation for some reason, it's probably because you haven't written all of the necessary plural forms. And finally, let's have a look at the Dash documentation. This is the biggest project, and if you are working on this, you'll probably be working on it for a long time. So I thought I would demonstrate a little bit how we navigate around here. So if we look at the Dash documentation, there's a table of contents on the side here. And each page corresponds to a specific URL up here. So we're now at the page introduction/about. And you can find that same page here just by searching for about, and you can see the introduction part when it loads is here on the left, and then there's 2 dashes and the word about, so you know what page you're working on there. If we just take a specific look at this page, you can see here this first paragraph actually has quite a few links in here. So we have links to other parts of the documentation, links to the roadmap. This is actually a link to GitHub, so outside the documentation. Or we can click a link like instant transaction confirmation, which will jump us to the instant send documentation on a different page inside the Dash documentation. So how do we make these links? If we have a look at, let me choose German again for our introduction page. And when that loads on my very slow internet connection, then we can see what that looks like when we're creating the links. So basically, the first paragraph here includes a lot of these little tags. Now you see it's taken out the part that should not be translated, and that's the part that points to the correct placeholder in the documentation. So if I just copy all of that in here, you can see there's a few parts here which need to stay in place. There's colon, ref, colon, then this little symbol which is called a backtick. Then this text here needs to be translated into your target language. Then there needs to be a space, the tag here, and then another backtick. Here I've selected the tag. And you need to consider spacing after the backtick. Like at this point we want a comma directly after the word instant transaction confirmation. Let me just go back to that page here. So you see instant transaction confirmation, the link ends, the comma begins with no space, and then we have a space after the comma. How does that work here? The words instant transaction confirmation space tag, that creates the link, and then no space, comma, after the backtick. So the backtick is where the hyperlink ends. Here we have the same thing for an external URL backtick. Notice that we don't use the word ref here, so that can stay out because it's an external link, and instead we just start with a backtick. This is the text for translation. Then inside the pointy brackets is the target link. Anything inside pointy brackets should not be translated. And then a backtick and an underscore, which must stay in place to indicate an external link. If you get stuck on this, again, contact me. There is plenty of documentation out there for how to read this language. This is a language called restructured text. And also I've put a reference here in the developers section, translating dash docs. And if you look there, you can see that I've written out exactly how it needs to be translated, right? So here, for example, with the stars to indicate bold or external hyperlinks, backtick, words, space, pointy brackets, link, backtick, underscore. This is just the syntax of the language that lets us make all of this fully automated when we import the other languages. So after you've done your translation, it can be built into this documentation, and then you should read through it one more time to check that everything appears as expected. I think that's it for our video at this point. I've covered as much as I can think of in advance, but I'm sure there will be more questions. You can contact me at any time at leon.white@dash.org or under the username Strophe on the forums and on Discord. I'd like to thank you all very, very much for listening to this rather long video, and also for translating for Dash. Without the translators, using Dash is going to be a whole lot more difficult in most of the world. So everyone working on translation is doing crucial work, and I just want to say thank you very much for your time. Alright, looking forward to working with you all. Cheers.